Brisco meets up with a ghost from his past.
Weren't you killed in a gunfight?
I was only gut shot. I'm stronger now with less appetite.
And runs into an old flame.
There's a fire.
I know.
No, in the barn.
The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. An all-new episode next Friday at 8, 7 Central.
Here's the thing about the Brisco County Junior Show. This is the 1-year anniversary of our having released one of these, or near enough to it. The plan was always, since it was a Friday night show, that whenever there would be a week where I blew my deadline for having a podcast out on Wednesday, that I'd holler at Mac here, and we'd just do a Brisco County, and I'd drop that in on a Friday without any heavy work being put into it. And problem number one, I mentioned this in passing in a previous episode, is that when we talked about doing a Brisco County podcast, we were the only ones who were talking about that. There wasn't one, and so that made it more special to go ahead and do one. And then the 30th anniversary was going to come up, and so I was like, okay, well, it's time to do it. And then in preparing to finally do it, I found that the Evil Dead guys had already done the Brisco County podcast as part of their Evil Dead coverage, and so that took away a lot of the incentive to get that done. For the longest time, we did all our recordings live. It's not as weird anymore, but it's still a little weird for us to have to do all these recordings by the internet. It's kind of a bummer. It's fine, but it is a different energy than we would have when we're actually in a room together. But one of the things that is nice is that having listened to a few episodes of that Evil Dead show, it's clear that they're not into Brisco County. They're not into that genre. It's not on their wavelength. And so listening to people who weren't there for it the first time gripe about it, it's kind of a bummer. And I realize that I have a reputation. One of my big things is I'm the guy who finds fault in everything. I don't like anything. And hopefully that's an interesting perspective on stuff that you would consider to be a sacred cow, just to get a different, because I'm not just doing it to troll people. I'm just legitimately wired differently. But I do think there's also joy to be found in having people that just enjoy the same things you enjoy, talking about that excitedly and having fun with it. And so I do think there's value in getting a Brisco County podcast out. It's just it gets pushed back whilst I'm doing a bunch of other stuff. But blew my Wednesday deadline. Friday's coming up. So it's about time we finally got back to the show. And it's got a decent following too. I just did social media for it, and we get a lot of likes and retweets and stuff. And it's just, I just haven't been serving this audience by not buckling down and actually doing some episodes. So we're finally back for one.
We back, cowpokes.
And I was trying really hard to find ratings, and I don't know if you know this, given how much information is at the tip of your fingers these days, it's really hard to find ratings on old shows, man. Everything's behind, the Nielsen stuff. You have to, have logins and stuff to get this information. It's crazy.
That's bizarre. I would never know. I would just think that was just readily available.
You assume it'd be, on Wikipedia or something, right?
Yeah.
It's not that easy. And I went through a bunch of different websites trying to navigate it. And even the ones that said they had ratings, you click on it and then it's a dead link or the whole site's gone. Very frustrating. But one of the sites I was looking at had an article from 2009 it was related to the Western Writers of America, who offered a list of their 50 greatest television Western series of all time. And Brisco County came in 35th, which is respectable.
Nice.
The ones that preceded at number 30 was The Yellow Rose, which I barely remember existing. I can't tell you anything about it. 31's Tales of Wells Fargo from the 50s. I've never heard of that one. Same goes for The Lazarus Band from 96. And then The Gene Autry Show. And then finally, one I recognized, Alias Smith and Jones from the 70s at number 34. Now, the ones that beat, though, were much more familiar to me. Trackdown, Kung Fu, Lonesome Dove the series, the Magnificent Seven TV show from 1998, and Broken Arrow and F Troop. I'm actually much more familiar with and impressed by the ones that Brisco County beat than the ones that beat it.
I'm not I know Bonanza, I know Gunsmoke.
Number 4, number 1.
Okay. And I think that's it. I think that's my entire knowledge of, cause the Rifleman wasn't a cowboy show, right?
Yes, it was.
A cowboy show?
With Chuck Connors?
Yeah, it was. Okay.
Yeah, that's number 6.
And I only remembered the Rifleman because it came on right after another show that I watched, and I can't remember what it was. It was super late at night, and as soon as that show was over, it'd be the Rifleman, and then he does that opening where he's just like, bah, 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 bah.
Right.
The Rifleman.
Yeah,
I would space out and catch some of those episodes, but parts of those episodes.
They used to run Branded after another show that I watched, and so I've always been more familiar with the opening to that, which was another Chuck Connors Western.
All but one man died there at Bitter Creek. And they say he ran away. branded, scorned as the one who ran. What do you do when you're branded and you know you're a man? Wherever you go for the rest of your life, you must prove you're a man.
He was a big thing in like the 60s and early 70s. And so once you get into the 80s and 90s, he was one of those guys who kept turning up in stuff, kind of like a Jack Palance type, where he was always having to do material that was beneath him. You knew he had been a big star, and then he was doing Werewolf for Fox in the 80s. And so because of that familiarity with him slumming, it made me more aware of him with back pain in his heyday, even though I didn't really watch that stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, plus I remember that they referenced Branded on an episode of Married with Children, so that didn't hurt either. What do you do when you're branded and you know you're a man?
Nope, don't remember.
Yeah. He was like a cavalryman who, I think he was framed or he just had a failure. And so the opening was always like them breaking his sword in half and ripping his pouches off and sending him away from the fort. And he's trying to like recover his honor after this defeat from his military career. So that's what that was about.
Cool. I don't know what black and white or color.
Color. Because it was after the Rifleman.
Okay.
The Rifleman, if I remember correctly, transitioned from black and white to color.
Yes, that is correct. Of that, and we are literally tapping out my exhaustive knowledge of Rifleman trivia. Some episodes that came on after whatever show I watched were black and white, and some episodes that came on after that show I watched were in color. That's it.
Well, and you're not a big Western guy either. Were there any Western series besides The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. that you ever watched, or was that like the exclusive Western content on your television screen?
No, but I will say just before Brisco, and I mean, maybe it was at the same time as Brisco, there were a lot of good Western movies that came out. You had your Young Guns movies, you had Tombstone. So I liked the sort of that new age Brat Pack version of Westerns. But yeah, like the old Western, spaghetti Western TV shows and stuff. No, I never watched any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Not that I can remember. I mean, maybe I feel like I'm spacing out on.
Didn't you watch Deadwood?
No, I watched like maybe an episode of Deadwood, and it was like really, really dark, and it was just not where I wanted to be at the time, so we never picked it back up.
Yeah, I've wanted to re-watch the series because they came out with that movie a year or two back, and you know it's 3 seasons, and it's just that's a lot to take on. I'm not a big binge watching guy, but hopefully in the next couple of years I'll get around to finally doing that because it is a really great show.
I got to put that one back on the list because I've never heard a bad thing about it. So
it definitely is dark, but it also is the artful use of profanity on that show is a thing to behold. You know, it puts Quentin to shame how much profanity they have on that show and how well it's used. But it's got its funny moments too. But it's definitely a dark show. It's a very, I wouldn't say it's depressing. There are fun elements, but the environment itself is pretty depressing because I mean these are dirt poor people on the frontier doing just the worst stuff to get by, and so it's hard not to go to some dark places with that.
Question: Little House on the Prairie, Western or not?
Yes, definitely a Western. My grandmother used to watch that. I think she had a thing for Michael Landon, and so I watched a fair few episodes of Little House on the Prairie too. Now it's not a gunfighter show; it's a frontiers show that occasionally featured guns, but it really was a family drama and a town drama that happened to be set in the Old West.
That's why I wasn't sure if it hit the criteria.
Well, it was semi-autobiographical, so you don't have a lot of gunfights. It's more like, you know, what's Nellie Olson getting up to this time, that sort of stuff.
Nice save. All right. So we're going to talk about this episode?
We probably should.
Are we ready to go there yet? Or do you want IMDb any more info on it?
This is Brisco and Jalisco. It originally aired on September the 17th, 1993. We are continuing our policy of discussing the episodes as they were released, since we both watched the show when it was coming out new, not necessarily the chronology of the show. This was actually the 5th episode filmed, but it was the 4th episode aired. Directed by James A. Contner. It was written by series creators Jeffrey Boehm and Carlton Coos. So
this episode opens up with a phenomenal poker scene. So Socrates comes down into one of the saloons, and Brisco is playing cards against a guy. And, you know, Socrates runs over, he's like, "Hey, Brisco, we got to get out of here." And he's like, "1 second." And it basically turns into this cheat off where Brisco's like rubbing his sleeve. Or no, they show the guy deal from the bottom of the deck to himself instead of the top of the deck. And then Brisco takes his cards and he rubs it on a sleeve to get another card. And then that dude, reaches on the table and he hits one of those like automatic automatic card servers to give himself another king. And then Briscoe's like scratching his neck, and then the waitress walks over and she's got one in her girder, and then he pets like a dog, and there's one hidden under the dog's collar, and they're just going back and forth, just like their entire hand is completely false, right? And they're both shoving all their chips in, and then finally, the dealer at the table had, what was it, 5 kings or whatever, or some ridiculous, you can't even have 5 kings. He had like 5 kings, and then Briscoe had 5 aces, 2 of which were diamonds. Like, it just complete. So these dudes immediately pull all their guns and put them in Briscoe's face, and the guy's like, whoa, he cheated me fair and square, or something like that. They give him all the chips. It was and they cut to credit for the intro, and it was just like I was dying during the scene. It was so good. It just kept going. It wasn't just that he when he starts petting the dog, oh hey there, Rover, whatever his name is, and he pulls another ace out of the dogs. It was so absurd. I was cracking up. It was great.
Well, and the guy he was playing against, he had one of those Rube Goldberg type devices where it was like an accordion. They would shoot from out of his sleeve and give him additional cards and stuff. It's one of those things where it may not have been funny the first few, but once you get up into double digit numbers of scams, it becomes funny over the progression of it, just by the excess of it. And it's fun too because I still tend to think of Briscoe County as being a square, because he's just such a upright kind of guy, an educated guy, a straight shooter. And so it's nice to be reminded sometimes that he does have his lowly qualities, and certainly cheating at cards is clearly one of them.
Yeah, like I said, I loved it. It was great. It was almost like a Naked Gun bit or something like that. It was just, again, it just got more and more comical as it went along. It was great. And then again, the line, he cheated me fair and square, was fantastic. So anyway, from there we do opening credits, and it's Briscoe and Socrates back at the robber barons, and they're basically telling them, hey, we had a train full of guns that was Texas border. We think there could be some disruptions going on between factions down there, and we need you to go down there and check it out. And he's like, hey, you hired me to look for the Bly gang. I'm not looking for missing weapons. And they're like, well, they hijacked the train by painting a mural of a tunnel on a big piece of rock, which is exactly how they sprung the Bly gang to begin with, which was when Briscoe's father was killed. That was the prison transport train. So that's where Briscoe's like, oh, okay, then yeah, I'm going down there. I don't really care about your weapons, but I'll head down there. And like, well, that's why Socrates is going with you. So they send the two of them to, and of course Socrates is like, what am I going? And he's saying, what's he coming? I got to babysit this guy the whole time. So they head down on horseback, and there's a little bit where they get stopped.
Hold on, before you get too far from it too, hold on.
Go for it.
I just want to mention that the robber barons are both Western veterans. One of them is Paul Brinegar from Rawhide, and the other is Robert Fuller from The Return of the Seven. Speaking of the Magnificent Seven.
I was going to say that's carries on the theme, right? Because I think was it in the pilot or whatever? Or the robber barons were both former. They're showing respect to their elders in this, to their roots, which I respect. So from there, they head down to Mexico, and they're on horseback, and they get stopped by some bad hombres, I guess you could say. And basically, they're telling them, were they going to rob them or ask them what they were doing there? And
well, they were pretending to be customs at first, but over time you realize that they're Frito Banditos.
Right. So Briscoe's like, oh, well, you know what? I do have this, and he pulls out a stick of dynamite and lights it. And he was all like, oh, here, why don't you take it? And he throws it at them, and it's just sitting there burning until these dudes are like, oh, okay, this guy's not bluffing, and they turn around and run off. He hops back on the horse with Socrates, and so they ride off on horseback, and he's like, well, hey, what about the boom? And the whole thing lights up and goes like it wasn't a fake stick of dynamite. That was 100% real. So from there, they get to the general. What was the general's name? I
can find that out. But I was going to mention that, I'm watching the Banditos with my Mexican girlfriend. I'm like, oh boy, are we going to have some embarrassing conversations after this? Because those guys did not acquit themselves well. But thankfully, they didn't continue with that for too long. Most everybody else, acquits themselves reasonably well, including General Zaca, who's played by Miguel Perez.
Yeah, and I think I'm not sure if all those dudes were actually Hispanic, but
yeah, I think there's some brown face at play there. Indeed.
Yeah, the mustaches especially were a little much, but the general was definitely Hispanic, so that was like, okay, good. Briscoe says he knows the general, so he'll find out what's going on with these weapons. They sit down, they start having drinks, and he was like, Socrates is like, what is this drink? It's phenomenal, and he was like, oh, well, it's lime. Was it squeezed on the legs of virgins and in into, the finest gold tequila. And then he yells over to one of the waitresses. He's like, hey, Margarita, why don't you bring these guys more of your special drink? And it's like, wah, wah. You know what I mean?
Oh,
She's
Look,
the Margarita.
If you can't get into that sort of dad humor, this is the wrong podcast and the wrong television show for you. Sorry.
Absolutely. This is totally on brand humor. So from there, they start talking about the weapons and stuff. And he's like, you know what? The general's like, we don't talk about that now. It's late. Now it's time for the entertainment. And who's the entertainment? None other than Dixie Cousins from when was the last time she was in an episode? Episode 2, maybe?
Yes, she was in episode 2. That's right.
So, yeah, Dixie comes out and does a wonderfully overdub. It was a very strange dubbed performance because she was obviously not singing, and they dubbed that in because it was very soundstagey, her voice. Mm-hmm. But they kept the crowd's voice in it. Like, it was really all I could picture during the scene, because she's like hanging off of Socrates and she's hanging off of Brisco. Were they just in complete silence and they just told these guys to react? Like, all I could think of is how weird this must have been to not. Like, were they playing a recording so that she was lip syncing to it?
I would hope they'd at least have the recording going, like it was a music video, something.
Hope they did. Anyway, so she puts on her performance, which was very fantastic. She is a very attractive young lady, and she was quite scantily clad in that scene, so that was very nice.
It was funny though, because was it just me or was her? She's obviously got an accent that she does for the character, and sometimes it was Mae West, and sometimes it was John Wayne. So I feel like maybe she's still kind of getting a feel for her character.
Okay, so you want to hear my note here?
Sure.
Here's my note. It says, Dixie is doing a serious John Wayne impression, or did she have a stroke?
Oh, shoot.
Was it John Wayne, or did she have a slight palsy? Like, I can't tell the way she was drawing out some of the words.
Somebody gave her a note, and she wisely ignored that going forward, but she took it at this particular episode, and it showed that she should have tossed that thing in the waste bin immediately.
Bro, I was like, you didn't talk like this in the other episode. I would have totally remembered her doing a just awful John Wayne impression. And it came in it came and went in this episode. She laid it on pretty thick in that first scene after she was singing with him. But every now and then it popped up. But I was just like, what is going on?
Is this some sort of a code?
Dude?
Are you trying to give me a message that, through this accent? I don't understand. What's happening here?
It was hilarious.
Are you held captive by the general? What's going on?
Yeah. So basically she warns them that, she thinks the general's up to something. So they sneak out, the Socrates and Brisco, they sneak out of their room at night to kind of snoop around and see what the general's up to. And there they see it's Pete, right? Pete Hutter?
Pete Hutter, yep.
Pete Hutter, who was from the pilot, right? Or no, didn't he get shot in like
no, he was shot in the pilot, as I recall.
The pilot, he gets shot. That's right. So he's there, and he's the one who stole. I mean, he was the one who painted or he got the painter to paint the rock, right? Because he was the one that sprung them out of the train in the pilot, right?
He's a rock painting patron.
Right. So he's the one with the weapons. He's trying to sell them to the general. And that deal kind of starts to go bad. And the general's men come over and they're like, General, the gringos are locked in their room. And he's like, why don't you go put them to bed? Like wink, wink, as in get rid of them. And of course, Socrates and Brisco are watching this happen. And they kind of look back over at their room. Those dudes walk in and just waste. They're just like firing into the room, obviously not realizing that they're not there. But let me see from there.
I'll give you a short break here. So yeah, as you mentioned, Pete Hutter was shot in the pilot, and so the safe assumption would have been that he'd been killed then. It was during a gunfight, but my understanding is they just liked his performance of the character so much that they wanted to bring him back. So as mentioned, this was the 5th episode film, so you got a nice little gap in there for him to have healed up. Brisco County does make mention of, didn't I shoot you? And he was basically saying that I was only gut shot. I come back stronger and with less appetite. And there's a cute bit where Brisco's like, you'd probably be a good model for weight loss. And he's like, why would anybody want to lose weight? And it's a pretty fair assertion there, because until, we had the wealth of sugary foods and stuff that we had in the 20th century going forward, people, didn't tend to get fat. And if you got fat, it was a sign of affluence, and it was actually pretty desirable. So what until really in the last 100 years or so that it was a bad thing to at least look a little chubby?
100 years, maybe like 20 or maybe like 40 years. I mean, I think it's a little more recent than the American obesity problem has really exploded over the last 30, 40 years or so. But anyway, I thought that was he's like, why would I want to lose weight? And I was like, that was the first thing I thought of too. I was like, yeah, because back then this was not an issue. You're riding on a horse ridiculous and 100-degree weather with no air conditioning, nobody had issue and like starving for days on end. There was nobody having issues of weight back then. And again, if you were, it's because you were you were a robber baron or something like that. So
Dixie shows up to help get our guys out of the back of the casa. This is after Pete Hutter started calling for the general's men to come and kill Brisco, since he's supposed to be there and Brisco isn't. And so they make their way to a group of revolutionaries who are basically just farmers, but they're just trying to do what they can to fight against the general's oppression with what they have available to them. And Dixie's sympathetic to them. I believe that she was with the general acting as a double agent to feed them information.
Say that one more time.
I believe
she was.
I think Dixie was, because why else would she be with the general unless she was trying to get information on his movements and stuff to feed to the revolutionaries?
Okay. Yes. Okay. I agree. Sorry, I heard that backwards. Like you were saying that she was the plant from the general, and sorry, that it just went into my head wrong. Yes, I think that is correct. She was basically going over there to infiltrate, but she obviously had more ties to Emilio Pena, the leader of the resistance there.
Now that was a note you got down. Played by Michael De Lorenzo. He's probably best known for playing Alex Torres in the later seasons of Head of the Class. I wasn't watching the show by that point. He did do 61 episodes of Fame, but not only did I not watch that show, but he apparently didn't get any credits of anybody that was worth mentioning. But he was in several iconic videos of the 80s, including Beat It. He was one of the zombies in Thriller, and he was featured in Lionel Richie's Running with the Night. The other thing that he's well known for is he played PFC William T. Santiago, the victim in A Few Good Men. He was also in Alive, so apparently he was either eaten or had to eat some people. I haven't seen Alive in a long time. I don't remember the specifics. His longest gig was one of the star performers on New York Undercover, which I think ran on Fox. And he was also on some show called Resurrection Boulevard. I never watched either one of them, so I can't speak to those.
He looked familiar.
Yeah,
I have not.
He
seen
definitely had one of those faces. Did you not watch Head of the Class?
Oh, maybe I watched Head of the Class. That's possible.
You've seen A Few Good Men, though. You've seen A Few Good Men, though.
Yes. Well, as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh, that's it. That was probably where it was. Anyway, so from there, he's basically explaining, that the reason the general has beef with all of them is because they're all of these poor people. They have to steal his crops so they can eat, and they have to do this, steal from him to do this, and stuff. Like they're just trying to survive, and basically the general's taking it as like a slight, right? So he's trying to snuff these people.
They make a big deal about how you have to constantly compliment him, and he has a very fragile ego and violent, emotionality and stuff. So they let you know that he's very temperamental, and that's reflected in how he treats the peasants.
Yeah, and they actually alluded to that. Not alluded to it. I mean, Brisco told Socrates to watch the way you talk about him, and the way, and that's why Socrates leads off before he goes, "You're a very handsome man." And it was like, what? Of course, Socrates goes way overboard.
Wrong route for a dandy-looking fellow with eyeglasses and everything.
Right. So at that point, there's a barn fire. I guess I missed.
What had happened was after they met with the revolutionaries, they had to have a place to sleep for the night, and so they put them into the barn. Socrates had to have a coin toss for the one of the stacks of hay against Comet, the horse, and then Brisco's lying on another stack. Dixie comes in to try to seduce him, but before things can get too hot between them, it gets hot in the barn because somebody sets it on fire.
Yep. So then that leads to a conversation with Emilio Pena. Basically, he's just like, it's just the weirdest thing. The general's just always one step ahead of us. We do this. It's like he knows we were going to do it. We're going to do that. It's like he knows we're going to do it. So one of his guys, Weddle, goes, well, I think we got a traitor. And he goes like, no, I don't think we got a traitor. Whatever. Like, all right, fine. Pena has a line that he just says justice is a word, because they were like, can we not have justice? And he says, I'm beginning to think justice is a word only for the rich. Which I thought was a nice little line there. Anyway, so Brisco says, I think I got an idea. So he goes to Pete and he's like, hey, let's team up. And Pete's like, what do you want me? And he goes like, look, if I wanted to kill you, I could have killed you, 5 minutes ago, but let's make some money. He goes, you know what? I was thinking about those robber barons are no worse than the Bly gang, whatever. So why am I doing all this dirty work for them? Why don't we go sell the weapons to the general and we'll split the money? So basically, Brisco takes I don't know, somehow he convinces Pete this is a good idea.
What it is he has more familiarity with the general, and he tell him, look, the general's going to backstab you. I I know this guy. That's all he ever does. You're going to end up not getting paid and dead. And if you try to, I think they were talking about him taking the money to another general further south, and there were complications. And he's just like, look, I'll negotiate this for you. I'll get the money for you.
Right. So he goes there and he basically tells the general, look, you don't kill me. I got your weapons. We want to do the deal now. And he was like, don't you try and double cross me. He was like, look, the weapons are in X Canyon. You pay me half now, and then when you come back with the weapons, you pay me the other half. And he was like, sounds like it's a deal. And then gave the whole, like, if you double cross me, Brisco. So he rides off, and before he gets too far, this is where you find out that it was Guero, as they call him. He was the turncoat the whole time, so he was going to inform the general that it was actually in Santa Ana Canyon instead of whichever canyon.
Right.
Maybe
one thing worth noting is that the general was, of course, going to double cross Brisco too, and had held him in office at gunpoint. So Dixie had to save him. They go back to the rebel camp, and that's when Aguero shows up. Aguero's played by Marco Rodriguez. Like most of the actors, particularly the Latin actors in this episode, they've all been working steadily ever since. And him in particular, he's been working steadily since 1980. He hasn't done a lot that's really notable. He's just been in a lot of stuff, but he may be recognizable to some folks as Torres in the Crow movie.
Oh, yeah, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good for him. So basically, he's informed the general what the correct canyon was that they're going to be at. So they're at the canyon with the rebels and with Pete, and the head of the rebels actually. Okay, so the general starts storming that canyon, and that's when Pena basically offered. He's like, Pete, I'll buy the guns right now. Like, we're all going to be dead. Sell us the weapons right now so we can use them. And he's like, I ain't selling you no weapons.
Well, the thing is, he's going to offer him the half that Brisco had scored.
Right.
He's like, I'm not taking half. And then, of course, he's going to end up with nothing because here comes the general, raiding, and a big old standoff occurs.
Yeah. So they have a brief shootout, and then Brisco basically convinces them. And they do that a lot in the series, where a little trick Brisco uses at the beginning of the episode is kind of the trick he uses at the end of the episode. So he convinces them to all leave. He grabs a couple sticks of dynamite, lights them up, and he's going to ride straight for those weapons and just blow the whole wagon full of weapons up. The general sees this, and he tells Guero, he's like, go stop Brisco. And he goes, and we'll cover you or whatever. And he's all like, what? And he's like, go stop him. He's like, okay. So he heads out towards Brisco, and they're basically having this race. Gets to the wagon, throws the dynamite in, just as Guero jumps into the wagon to try and throw the dynamite out, and the whole wagon goes up in an explosion, assumingly blowing him to pieces, correct?
I can't imagine he could have gotten out of that, and I don't think we're going to see the continuing adventures of Aguero unless he's also going to have become a Weight Watcher or something.
Correct. Yeah. He'll come back. Oh, it was just a flesh wound. So let me see. I don't know. That's kind of where the episode ends. He has another little fling or a little parting goodbye with Dixie Cousins. Them both obviously very attracted to one another, and she's like twirling her hair as he rides off. He and Socrates ride off.
It's funny that they're having these teases because it's like they did have sex in the pilot. There was unambiguous, so it's like it's too bad that they. I mean, I guess the problem is that they don't have any opportunities because of the adventure to partake of one another, and so that's where the sexual tension is coming from.
Yeah, because she even had the line that one time where she was like, I've got a vision problem, and he's like, what is it? She's like, anytime I see you, my eyes go blurry or something like that.
I lose focus.
They were getting
my eyes lose focus.
Yeah. So they got close a few times in this episode, but every time they were interrupted.
So
that was the episode.
Yeah. So we've got Pete Hutter back. He is one of the continuing bad guys in the show. He's in 7 total episodes. This is his second appearance. He's going to have, he's going to show up again pretty quick on Socrates' Sister, which was I believe the second or third episode filmed, but it still hasn't been released yet. So that's going to be the next one we cover, in fact. And also, Kelly Rutherford does 7 episodes, but they're not the same 7. So they're only going to appear together one more time over the course of the series in an episode called And Baby Makes 3. So it's interesting that they both have the same number of episodes, but they're not going to be the same ones. And there's a sense of a lot of these recurring characters being in a lot of episodes, which is true, but they're not necessarily in the same episode. Like this episode, we have no Lord Bowler, for instance. We have no John Bly. So although they're in a lot of the shows, they're not always going to be there. Now, as Pete Hutter, he also appears in the Stagecoach episode and in the 2-part series finale, High Treason. Besides this, he could be seen in the movie Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2, which I saw theatrically. Did you ever see that one?
No.
Yeah. Surprisingly randy for, an otherwise fairly staid ghost story. He was in Bird on a Wire with Mel Gibson and Goldie Hawn, which I also saw theatrically. I can't really explain that. I guess we were just all swept up in that, Riggs charm of the day. He also appeared in some episodes of 21 Jump Street, but they were on the latter end when I wasn't watching anymore. He did MacGyver. He did the Doug Rigor Star Trek The Next Generation. He did the episode called A Fistful of Datas, so I assume he must have been a cowboy in that too. He's done a ton of work, but he's probably best known outside of Brisco County. He was in the full series, 2 seasons of The Last Ship, which I believe was on TNT, playing Tex Nolan. He was also in a long run of episodes on Suits, playing Jack Soloff, and he played, again, a little bit of a Crow continuity here. He played Top Dollar in the TV show The Crow Stairway to Heaven.
How about that? 2 Crow actors in 1 episode of Brisco County Jr.
I guess we can talk about the quality of the episode. I thought it was fine. It was cute, but definitely another one of those episode of the week kind of deals.
Yeah, I think so. This wasn't really universe building. There was no orb in this episode. Outside of Pete, there's, Bly's not in it. In fact, he even says, "Where's Bly?" And he's like, "This is just me, dude. Like, I'm the one out here running these guns. He's got nothing to do with it." Which I like. I like that he's not going to be in every episode, right? We don't need that, especially we're obviously not binging it because we have this huge gap between episodes. But the fact that we can technically sit down and watch this in 2 or 3 days, if Bly was in every single episode, you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, here we go again. So I like that they resisted having him and having the orb in every single episode. So yeah, I think it was nice. But yeah, this was sort of a normal, not a filler episode, but this would just be a regular self-contained episode of Brisco County Jr.
It is funny though, they travel all the way down to Mexico based on the method of operation of a guy that they'd assumed was dead. Because by all rights, everybody assumed that Pete Hutter wasn't going to come back again. So it's like maybe you should have just checked to make sure you did the job the first time, and you wouldn't have to be tracking him down a second time. Yeah,
and he could have taken care of him in this episode too, and didn't do it.
Yeah. One thing I liked, you do have this sort of like more of an antagonistic presence more than an outright villainy, even though, he probably was one of the guys who gunned down his dad. But I do like the way they interact with each other, because Brisco really shows his intellect when he's talking to Pete. Pete, because of that drawl, you tend to think, you tend to underestimate him. But he brings up stuff that's like really left field, where it's like, I don't even know what that is. You can tell that he's got more book learning than he lets on. And it's fun because it makes Brisco tend to talk a little bit smoother, a little bit smarter. He's trying to outsmart Hutter, because Hutter does, despite coming off as less than, he knows not to trust Brisco. He does have his own little plans. He has his own little strategies. You do have to kind of outthink Pete, and that brings out some of the best in Brisco, because you watch the scene where he's selling Pete on the idea of selling the guns, or helping him acting as an intermediary to sell the guns, and he has to be convincing, and he has to play it completely straight. He can't be patronizing. He can't be, smirking or anything like that. And so you see Bruce Campbell playing a role about as straight as you ever get to see him in anything, and he does quite a good job with that. So it was nice to see. I think that part of the reason why it's fun to have Pete come around is not only is he a fun character in and of himself, but he brings out fun things and interesting things in the other actors.
Yeah, good. I mean, you could argue Pete. Brisco's dad didn't even catch Pete. Mm-hmm. Pete was loose to spring the rest of the Bly gang. So then he survived the gunshot from Brisco. So Pete's a pretty impressive dude when you look at the resume, even from the 2 episodes he's appeared in. Bly got caught by Brisco's dad.
Yeah.
Pete's the one who had to bail him out. So and I think this was good too. They don't make him some bumbling idiot. He's definitely got the like you said, the drawl, and he's got that I don't know the way he talks is like, this guy's a dum-dum. But look, the dude's he's got the, I guess it wouldn't be streets, he's got saloon smarts or whatever they would call it back then, because everybody was from the street.
Sawdust skills, or what
exactly.
is it?
So
he's a tumbleweed thinker.
Pete's a pretty formidable counterpart in the series. He's not just some dum-dum.
Well,
which,
and also,
I think is nice.
It'd be easy for him to get lost amidst all the other cowboys, but he does have like a distinctive look about him, and I particularly like that he's got the hand strap. You know, he's got that little strap around his finger, and it makes him stand out apart from other people. That one little thing makes a big difference in terms of costuming, letting you know that he's not just another one of the cowboys. Yeah,
a really good attention to detail, making him stand out, especially for a character that I guess they obviously from jump didn't think was end up here again. So it was good. It was a fun little episode, but again, nothing really pulling you into the next episode. This was very much a self-contained little issue.
It was a nice little done in one, yeah.
Yep.
So besides the fact that we were talking a lot about Bruce Campbell during our Darkman coverage on Rolled Spine, also the Fire and Water Podcast Network has recently done their Zorro month, celebrating the 101st anniversary of Zorro, which is the sort of timetable we would tend to work on. But they've been doing a whole month of it, and it's been cool. I haven't listened to everything yet, but I've listened to a fair amount. And since Max Romero is one of our listeners and retweeters and the likes, I wanted to make sure to give that a shout out. And we'll probably throw a promo on here as well. I will say, though, that they put out in a tweet a head-to-head of who had the better horse, the Lone Ranger or Zorro. And so my question to you, Mac, is can you name Zorro's horse? Because I sure couldn't without a prompt.
Ooh, what was Zorro's horse? I cannot.
It was apparently Thunder.
Thunder. Okay, I guess that kind of.
So for me, the Lone Ranger automatically wins just by the fact that I not only do I know the name, but it's incorporated into the themes of the character and literally the musical theme of the character. Now, my question to you: who's got the better horse, Brisco County or the Lone Ranger?
Oh, it's Brisco County. The Hi-Ho Silver can't flip a coin. Are you kidding me?
Comet is awesome. I love Comet. So I would agree with you. I think the Comet is the best of the horses.
That was another good scene in this episode that I forgot to mention, was that when they get into this, so obviously Socrates is like, oh, I got to go to Mexico, and and they get into this dude's compound, and he's like, linen sheets, and he's like a little kid, and he runs, and of course he'd been drinking margaritas, and he dives on the bed, and he's like, springs in the mattress and all this stuff, and then there's a knock at the door, and he's all like, if that's Comet, tell him I already got dibs on this bed. So, which leads to the bit later on where they flip the coin for the stall or whatever. But it was so great. There's a knock at the door, and Socrates immediately assumes it's the horse, like only the show, dude. And it was just like, that's Comet, and I'm like, yeah, it probably is Comet, But it's just like, that was the horse we were talking about. Could have used a little more Comet in this episode.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make that complaint for every episode. I need more Comet.
Brisco! The adventures of Brisco County Jr. will continue after these messages.
August is Zorro month here at the Fire and Water Podcast Network.
To celebrate the 101st anniversary of Zorro, we here at Fire and Water are producing several episodes celebrating the Fox and his appearances in various media.
First up is The Mirror Factory. We focus on where the legend began, the seminal novel by Johnston McCulley, originally entitled The Curse of Capistrano.
Then, over on FW Presents, we'll look at El Zorro's long and storied publication history in the realm of comic books.
Then on Film and Water, we'll discuss the classic 1940 film The Mark of Zorro with Tyrone Power.
Then on Digest Cast, we'll get small to discuss the Zorro comic digest from Paper Cuts.
And finally, back on FW Presents, we'll examine the classic 1950s Disney Zorro television series starring Guy Williams.
You can find all of these shows at fireandwaterpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
So carve out some time to celebrate Zorro Month with us this August on the Fire and Water Podcast Network.
Wait, that's all we're doing? Why did you make me watch Zorro the Gay Blade?
The Adventures of Brisco County Jr., starring the legendary chin of none other than Bruce Campbell, is a short-lived series that aired on Fox between 1993 and 1994. Why cover such an obscure series and one that was cancelled by the end of its first season? It stars Bruce Campbell! On top of that, it offers an intriguing counterbalance to today's darker, grittier entertainment. One that hails from a time where heroes were noble, villains were dastardly, and femme fatales were not as fatale. A throwback to Western serials of yore with a dash of science fiction, Brisco County arguably represents an end of an era within its primary genre in American television. Just a good old-fashioned adventure with plenty of cornball humor, action, and a horse that prefers to sleep in hotel rooms. So join us every week as we cover all 27 episodes of The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. We invite you to watch along and let us know in the comments below what your thoughts are on each episode, and make sure to like and subscribe for more fun on Hilarity by Default.
And now back to the adventures of Brisco County Jr.
So I guess we'll do the social media now. Bit challenging for a year-old episode. We've got from Warlord Worlds, hooray, looking forward to this, can't wait to listen. Impossible de Intangible wrote Bob the Goon power kicking like that, and he'd stand on the ball and fall over. And they tweeted out a picture of the Bob Goon action figure from the Batman Toy Biz line. Ryan Rydell wrote, I've still got my Brisco County Jr. DVD set. This is a sign that it's time to rewatch them. You've had a year. I hope you've got that in. And I hope you're not expecting us to cover much of anything else in the next year.
Actually, no. I hope you didn't watch them and then do a whole podcast on it and cover the entire series.
Right, and now we're the third podcast on Brisco County, right? Coffee and Comics wrote, I was just thinking last week how I hadn't heard anything from these guys about Brisco lately. Lo and behold, here's a new episode. Randy Caldwell wrote, I'd listened to a Parker Lewis Can't Lose podcast, Key West 2. And given how often we can manage to get the Brisco County out, and Parker Lewis ran multiple seasons, I don't think we'd, in our natural lifespan, be able to finish it.
No, we would need a whole other pandemic. Next pandemic, we'll start Parker Lewis. Pandemic.
Podcast Lewis Can't Lose. So,
Pandemic Lewis Can't Lose.
108 Sage, Alan Middleton, Dr. Ange, Brian Mulvey, Chris at Bad Books for Beginners, Coffee and Comics, Comics in the Golden Age, Captain USA, Daniel French for Spony Sound Design, Dave's Comic Heroes blog, Dave Golding, Doc Strange, Arrow Mero, Evil Dead News, Gautam Shioran, Gregory Litchfield, Green Lantern HG Fighting the Good Fight, The Hammer Strikes, Random Geeky Stuff, History of Comics on Film, The Hoopers, Ice in the Face, Impossible de Intangible, Into the Weird, Jeffrey Brown, Jennifer DeRoss, J.V. Torres, Keith G. Baker, Christados, Longbox Crusade, Melly, Nexus of All Realities, Nerdfix Strangers, Odell Abner Dracula, Paul Matthew Carr, Professor Frenzy, Randomitable, Randy Caldwell, Revolutionary Mama, Richard Field, Richard G., Rise of King Asilas, Ryan Daly, Ryan Rydell, Secret Wars and Beyond Podcast, Sean Merrick, Simone J. Lima, Slangward Scott, True Stories, Varangian Vigilante, Resurrections, a Warlock and Thanos podcast, Warlord Worlds, and Words and Pictures.
Did we ever actually introduce the show?
No, you want to jump? I mean, we haven't really.
Welcome to The Coming Thing, an Adventures of Brisco County Jr. podcast. I'm a League Machine, and with me is
Diablo Frank. But the truth is, I don't think we've ever introduced the show because I actually was listening to a couple and just remember how it worked. And we mostly just sort of like it kind of the music introduces us for the most part. We never introduced ourselves, so it's probably for the best.
So, Bruce Campbell did tweet something about doing a Brisco County reunion or some sort of.
If I remember correctly, they did a charity table read where I think that a bunch of the surviving members got together with because I think Bowler was in there, so they had to get another actor to play that character, and they did a table read for charity for like $15 a head or something on the internet.
Is Bruce Campbell on Cameo?
I haven't checked. I really wanted to take advantage of Cameo, and I haven't gotten around to that yet.
We should totally get him to do I'm Bruce Campbell, and you're listening to the Adventures or The Coming Thing, an Adventure of Brisco County Jr.'s podcast.
Well, the first time I ever heard of Cameo was Rob Liefeld was on it, and I've been wanting to have Rob Liefeld curse us out for all the things we say on Spawnometer.
He does not. He is not on Cameo. That's very frustrating.
I didn't feel like he would though. Something in my gut was like, I just don't think Bruce Campbell. It's weird. It's like some people are built for something like that. Bruce is such a raconteur, and he's such a guy who likes talking to people face to face live. I think that it would be weird for him to just like record messages for people. Maybe I'm mistaken about that, but I just don't feel like he'd be wired that way. It feels like he would just not be interested in something like that.
No, but to get paid $150 a pop to look and say, "Hey, Samantha, Jimmy just wanted to say, give me some sugar, baby," and then he gets paid $150. Why is every rich person not on this, or every famous person not on this? Because you're definitely not rich if you're doing it. I'd never actually gone to Cameo's website before, and there are some just outrageously like, really, you're like, you think people are going to want you to say stuff? That's weird. But Bruce Campbell's got enough one-liners.
Oh, sure.
That I figured, like, dude, can you record my voicemail? I want Ash Williams to record my voicemail. I feel like he's perfect for that because he's got catchphrases. Whereas like Bruce Bowen from the San Antonio Spurs, it's $50. You can have him record a message. Like, who the hell wants Bruce Bowen to record anything? Like,
that's one of those PewDiePie kind of things where you do it just because it's so random, it's funny.
So back to Bruce Campbell. Anyway, I feel like he'd be perfect for Cameo. So that sucks. Although he'd probably charge a lot because like some of these people charge like $300 for a message, which is a little extreme.
Next Friday, Brisco's arch enemy.
Hello, Brisco.
Tries to send him to a watery grave.
Got that old sinking feeling?
And a close encounter with a beautiful redhead could be the kiss of death. The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. All new episode next Friday at 8, 7 Central.